What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creators Dan DiDio and Jim Calafiore. Welcome to the show.
Thanks,
Hi.
Greg. Great to be here, man.
And I'm excited to talk to you both. You have both been just legends in the comic game for so long, and I'm kind of curious. Did you grow up as kids always liking comics, or was this something that kind of came later in life?
I'll let Jim start. I always like to
Oh,
start first. I mean, you know what? You know how easy that was for me to say, let Jim start? I spent the last 10 years doing that, so it's easy to say it.
I was always into comics since I was a little kid. Um, First comic I bought myself. I mean, usually, your parents will give you like Archies and stuff like that. But the very first comic I ever bought was Hulk 127. I was with my grandfather in a luncheonette. So this goes way back. They'd have these things called luncheonettes. That was like you'd sit at the bar and you'd get coffee and whatnot at the counter. But then they had a wall that was just all periodicals, newspapers, magazines, comics, everything. It's long before comic shops. I mean, we're going back 50 years, 50 some years. And I said, I want that one, Hulk. And Hulk was my guy, and I grew up on Hulk my whole life. I've always loved comics.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Dan?
I'm a big Hulk guy too. But for me, it was Spider-Man. My first Spider-Man was, as I like to tell everybody, my first Spider-Man was Spider-Man 40. Spidey Saves the Day. Now it's the second issue by John Romita and all that. But for me, I was a big fan, or little fan, because I was only a kid at the time, of the Spider-Man cartoon in the 60s. And I really liked Green Goblin. So when I was in a store with my parents, they picked up that book, Spider-Man 40, and still have that original copy. No back cover, worn to death, but it's probably my pride and joy of my comic collection.
That's always good. Like that you both, you have characters that you related to right off the bat that you grew into loving. And so where at this point did this love for comics then transition into, you know what? I want to pursue a career in comics.
Oh, I always wanted to do it. I mean, I don't think I can pinpoint any transition. I was always into art and drawing and whatnot since I was small. And I don't remember ever not wanting to do it. I mean, there's other things too, I could say that I've never done that I wanted to do too, but comics, I was bound and determined to get into comics. And I did jobs that would just were holding places till I got in and was
So,
lucky enough to get in.
so you always knew you wanted to do this. And then how did you kind of then get your foot into the door of comics, knowing that you always wanted to do this then, Jim?
Well, I was doing the convention thing, seeing editors and whatnot, and not having enough success there. And the story is that there used to be this rag for comic shops, Comic Shop News, I think it was called. It was a free little newspaper at comic shops. And in the back, there was an ad for a new publisher who was looking for artists. And this is years ago. This is before internet, before any of that. And I just mailed them in some samples. And I got a letter back saying, yes, we want to publish you. We want to use you. And after I did a little happy dance, I realized that the guy didn't have his return address on the envelope. And I had lost the Comic Shop News and had no idea how to mail to them. And I fortunately remembered there was one book that he mentioned that they were putting out. I went to the comic shop. They had one copy of it. Great place. A lot of people came out of there. The Crow was done there. Guy Davis came out of there. Brett Bendis did stuff there. Lark. A lot of people came out of there.
And what was it then for you, Dan? What kind of was like, I want to get into working in comics?
For me, I've always had a love of comics. I had been submitting writing when I was younger. I think I got my first rejection letters from Marvel and DC probably might be earliest dated 1978, to be honest with you. So I was sending stuff in all the time. I was one of those kids who write letters and things. I had one of them published along the way. But my primary interest was working in TV and animation. So I had been working, I had time at CBS and ABC I was working as in children's programming for a while at ABC Children's, and that's where the comics intersected with everything that I did. Now, I had been doing some other writing at the side. I had actually had done some work for Dynamic Forces, doing some publicity work for them. I co-created a couple of characters with Jimmy Palmiotti for a line of cards called the Creators Universe card set. I helped Jimmy and Joe during their early days with event comics and all that. So, because Jimmy Palmiotti was a good friend of mine, we lived in the same building back in Brooklyn, and we shared a lot of same interests. And so, while he was involved in comics, I was working in television, and we sort of moved back and forth with each other. I actually had done some development way back when for an animation company that I worked for called Mainframe. We had gotten a property from Black Bull, which was Wizards TV, Wizards publishing arm, a book called Gatecrasher with Jimmy and Amanda. I think Mark Wade was involved in that. And we had developed that as an animated series for Fox and had gotten pretty far away before they ultimately passed. But I've always had an interest in comics. Even when I was at ABC, I had developed Metal Men, Thunder Agents as animated series that unfortunately got pushed aside when Disney bought ABC. So flash forward in a long way. I always had an interest, always found a way to work with comics. And ultimately, when I was looking to get out of animation, two things were happening simultaneously. I was co-writing Superboy with Jimmy Palmiotti. We were working together on the book. And at the same time, and completely independent of that, I was interviewing for a job at DC because I was looking to get back to the East Coast and work in New York again. And at that time, I was based on the West Coast, and I wanted to get back on the East Coast. So I got the job as an executive at DC, and then I was co-writing Superboy with Jimmy. And my first official function at DC was canceling my own series, which was Superboy, and then we sort of went on from there. So it was kind of interesting.
That always is painful when you have to kill your darlings.
Yeah, good thing Jimmy's a good sport and a good friend, because he took it better than I probably would have if he had told me.
So you both are now working on this series with Mad Cave Studios, Defenders of the Earth. This is a license and a property that's been around for a long time. Where was your first exposure into Defenders of the Earth? Was it the TV show? Was it in comics?
Mine's easy. When they called me to do the job. I had never heard of the TV series.
Yeah. I was actually, since I was working in television at the time, and also when I was working in animation, I was very familiar. And strangely, I knew about Defenders because I was actually following what Marvel Animation Studios was doing and how they were building out their facility and how they were doing work for hire projects. And so when they got the rights to do Defenders, I actually was watching the show more as looking at the craft of making it more so than a love of the characters and the story. Yeah. So it was fascinating for me because in those days everything was so integral to toy lines and things of that nature. So it wasn't just a cartoon, but also the toy lines that were built on it. So, and it was that assemblage that I was trying to understand as I was trying to get into animation. So it was fun to watch. And what I appreciated about it when I was I can't even say younger anymore, but during those days was that there was a little more maturity to Defenders of the Earth than possibly some of the other animated series that were out there at the same time. They made some interesting choices in regards to story and character that I felt were a little more trying to push the envelope a little bit more forward than more the traditional fare that was trying to sell toys. And it's funny because when I looked about some of those things, those are some of the skills we picked up along the way when we started to develop things when I got to Mainframe and started to work on Beast Machines and things like that,
Yeah. Well, Jim, your first kind of exposure you said was when you got the job. So how do you then go about prepping for this when you're doing art? Do you, do you look at just a bunch of research photos of other comics, other things? How do you as an artist then kind of craft what you want the characters to look like in this new story that's being told?
Well, I was generally aware of the characters because they're the classic King Feature Syndicate's characters, especially right. Flash and Phantom, Mandrake marginally, and I had no idea who Lothar was, which is the fourth character. Basically, it's being a licensed property. Um, there's not a lot of wiggle room
Right.
in terms of interpreting the characters, and it's better if you don't too much with the licensed property. So there was a lot of reference already sent to me. There was the Bible that was, I think, the turnarounds and character designs that were done for the cartoon itself.
Mm.
So I basically stick pretty close to that stuff. It's all going to be filtered through my style. And then anytime I got to look up something, I say to the editor, "Where is this?" And I've been pointed to some really bad YouTube transfers of the series. Um, and in terms of translating it, I'm working a little more open.
Okay.
It was an animated show. I'm working a little more open, a little heavier on the line weights. But other than that, I have a very specific style,
Yeah.
and when I get a job, I just do it. You know, it's my style. It's either going to come out like that or it's not. I mean, that's why they call me for a job.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love it. I love that. So then, Dan, with writing this story, believe I saw it's an 8-issue series. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
So where are you kind of then, like, how do you approach taking a property that's been around but kind of been a little dormant, if you will, for a long time? So newer readers might not be as familiar, like might know the characters a little bit. How do you what's your approach of creating a story to kind of bring it to a new audience?
Well, it was interesting because what I did is I came up with an overall arc for the story, and where I did is I actually looked at a starting point that would be almost as a following up to what the series was. So what I wanted to do was bring the original series to a conclusion pretty quickly and then move into a new direction for the story. Therefore, you knew where you stood and you didn't need the weight of knowledge of everything that came before to tell your story going forward. And just like you do anything, you have to make sure that you introduce every character, introduce every concept with the hope that there is a new reader coming on board, but also not turning off the longtime fans of this, because we have to be aware completely that the people that we're trying to attract right from the start are the fans of the original series. So when I did my overarching outline that I sent over to Mad Cave and to the editors there, what I did after I did that, I went back and I watched the series. I actually watched the cartoons again. And I felt good because a lot of the choices that we're making lined up pretty closely to a lot of the actions and motivations of the
Mhm.
characters that were taking place in the stories themselves. So they really started to align themselves, at least in a tone and a voice that I was hoping to push forward and be able to move into new directions. And it felt a lot more organic because of that. And as I watched the shows, I tried to find touch points in the television series that I can bring back, that I can allude to, so it even feels like a natural extension of the show as well. So that's always a fun exercise for me, is finding the different bits and pieces that you can build on that was pre-existing to be able to tell the story that you're looking to do. And these things came together pretty nicely.
Yeah.
Plus, we've jumped ahead a little bit.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we jumped
So
this story forward. We wanted to move things forward, and for me, also the most important thing was they had a Flash Gordon series going at Mad Cave, and we have these other characters, the Phantom and Mandrake, and I wanted to make sure that I really gave exposure to all these other characters that didn't have a platform already. And I really, and the other thing that was important about the TV series that's in this book is, well, the kids of these characters. You know, you have Rick Gordon, the son of Flash Gordon. You have the daughter of the Phantom and Jeddah. You have the son of Lothar and LJ, and you have basically a ward of Mandrake and Kashin. And by doing these four characters, it allows you to take a lot more risks and movement within the story because they have a lot more area to develop.
Yeah.
and those
No,
I had more room for interpretation because they were older.
Yeah.
And plus in the cartoon, it was like 80s hair all over the place on these kids. So, I trimmed LJ's afro, The only one I left the same was Flash's kid. He still got his 80s hair on him.
but it's kind of it sounds like it's a continuation of the series, but in a newer light. And you said it jumped forward, so we're getting to see these characters a little bit the kids a little bit older, and that dynamic then that shifts with parents of superheroes when they're not just kids anymore. They're a little bit older.
Yeah, and it basically we played up the stakes a little bit more in the show itself. You know, Ming and the soldiers of the ice soldiers from Mongo and all the soldiers established a beachhead on Earth, and they were attacking, but it wasn't a thing that was like felt around the world. It was really focused and directed at the defenders of the Earth themselves. Here, you feel the ramifications of Ming's attack on Earth throughout the world, and I think that's what's important, is because you want to show the stakes of this particular type of invasion and how it would have affected everyone, and then also how do people deal with the aftermath of something on that scale? And really, what's the defender's place in the earth if all of a sudden it's not as clear black and white what they're defending, and more importantly, if they don't have the full support of the world that they're protecting.
Mm.
So these are some of the challenges they're going to start to see develop in the story, and there's a lot of fun because we started a very particular part in the beginning of the book. And then we move everybody off, and we spend a couple of issues really looking at the individual characters before bringing them back together as a team again.
So I want to get kind of a little bit behind the scenes here of creating a little bit more. Is this your guys' first time working together on a project, or has this been something you guys have gotten to dip your toe in before?
Listen. I'm gonna go first on this one. I've been a fan of Jim's work for a long time. Jim did work for us. We were at DC and did a beautiful
Right.
job there. And when I was doing the Frank Miller Presents books, he was one of the few people I wanted to work with, and got to work. And we did 2 one-shots together there, and he did a brilliant job. So I enjoy it, and I. I'm just gonna get the gush for 5 seconds. I enjoy his dedication to detail, his really, and most importantly, his storytelling is what I love, because um, what allows me as a writer to do is, when I get pages from Jim, because the story's all on the page, you can tell what's happening by the art alone. It allows you as a writer to go in and really start to put more of the character in the dialogue rather than the explanation in the scenes or what's happening, and it gives you more flexibility to be able to work that way. So it's been great for me being able to work with them in this fashion again.
Well, thank you. I was going to say it's second, but I guess it's third, since we did
Third, yeah, pretty
one
much.
shot, and now this.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan,
Go ahead.
I was going to say Dan works a little. He works sort of a hybrid Marvel style. So the dialogue that's there is not going to be there when he gets to writing looking at the artwork.
Okay.
So with me, it's always just, yeah, making sure you know what's going on without either colorist or writer having to save it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think that's an important part. Like, Dan, you mentioned Jim's storytelling and artwork, and my first exposure that I can remember, Jim, was your time on Aquaman and stuff, and the what you bring to the table as an artist is something so special. And so, being in this industry for as long as you guys have, maybe working on a couple books together, does it get easier working with people that have been in the game for a while, or is it a little harder because you guys have your own ways of doing things?
Well, it's always going to be easier working with people who know what they're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get a script that makes sense, that understands visuals, and just even formatting. I mean, silly things like how to format a script correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope for, with me, I've worked with a lot of great writers over the years, and in general, pretty early on, I never got reined in or explained what to do.
Yeah.
Writers have seemed to understand that I at least know what I'm doing, and you get that with an artist who's been doing it that long, that I'm going to change a pacing here or there, or a close up here or there, or give you a different angle that's going to work better. I don't change the story. Well, that's not my job. But to make it work visually in static images, I've had a lot of trust from writers over the years, which is great. I mean, it's really great to have people just say, yeah, no, do it. I used to check a lot of times. Can I change it? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I actually like when artists do that, and that's one of the reasons why I probably don't like working full script. I'm not a huge fan of it. I like it drives artists crazy. Don't get me wrong, but I like the flexibility of seeing it develop. And I always used to say, and I still say, the artist has a better visual sense than the writer. So for a writer to dictate visual interpretation always seems backwards to me, because we should be letting the artist really interpret the visual interpretation of that. But also, because you're working with third party, and we're working on third party script, the full script gives comfort to the third parties so that they can see fully what's being realized and what's being done with their characters. And you don't want them coming in last minute and knocking your legs completely out underneath you because you went off in a direction that you were just following. So I get the whole thing, and Jim's right. I do change all the dialogue. Even sometimes it might change the entire tone of it. But what's good about what's fun what we're doing here, what's interesting, is we've been at this for a while now, and we're a few scripts in already. And as I'm working on 2 or 3 scripts ahead on the full script, I'm getting the dialogue, and on an earlier one, I'm actually getting a different sense of the characters' voices, and I'm actually going back in and clarifying who they are a little bit more. And I say this in every case: you sort of got to follow where they lead you. It's not just about you writing it, but they're telling you where they want to go in a weird way. And if they're taking me in a new direction, and the direction feels right, I don't want it to be undermined by an earlier decision. And that's why I try to go back and just tweak it a little bit to get back to where I want to be. But the good part is when the art's there, it's just a dialogue change more so than just than having to redo entire scenes and things of that nature. So it's a lot more, it runs a little bit smoother that way,
Yeah, for sure. You both have had your time too working on some creator owned projects. Is there a difference of how you approach writing, and even, or maybe not even approach, because I feel like, Jim, you're kind of handcuffed when it's a creator owned versus a property like Defenders, like where you have to do what that is. There something that you gravitate towards, let's say that more so, of like that you appreciate about the constraints of maybe intellectual property like Defenders versus having just a free reign to do whatever you want to do creatively?
Well, doing the creator owned is always a lot more fun and a lot more gratifying. When I write myself, the interesting thing is I've got more of a visual sense, but I have a tendency to just write the script, and then later on when I'm drawing it, I'm like, why did I write this? Why did I give myself this much work? In terms of working on licensed properties, it all depends on the licensee.
Okay.
Really. Some can understand it and some can't.
Yeah.
And they'll nitpick you to death.
Yeah.
But it seems like we're doing well now that we've gotten into the next issue and several covers in. King Features definitely seems to be understanding what we're doing. So there's not a lot of, change that eyebrow, move that eye to the left, can he not have his hand up towards that wall? That sort of stuff can get really onerous when you're trying to get something done, especially on a deadline.
Yeah. And for me, it's, I'm at that point in life and career where I just looking for things that are interesting challenges on things I want to work with and do. And if I have a story to tell, then creator own's fun way to go. But also I like the challenges of somebody putting me in a box and trying to write your way out of a box too. There's something really enjoyable about that. I think that goes back to my days in animation. And this probably for me writing wise is closer to my time working in animation than it was working to my time in comics. Even though this is a comic book I'm writing, I feel more affinity to the style of writing I was writing when I was working on other people's projects. I had done a series called War Planets several years back, and that was a toy line that we had to turn into a cartoon. And the amount of work that we put into that and creating the world, but still having to play within the parameters of the toys. There's something that I kind of have fun doing that. It's just, because somebody creates a box for you. I think those restraints actually make you a better writer in some ways, because you have to write your way out of it without breaking it. and it forces you to find clever ideas and clever ways to do it. And one of the things that it took me a couple of issues to get into this with Defenders, but I realized just have fun. Just get a little sillier. And I don't know if as the scripts get on, they're getting a little bigger and a little noisier and a little crazier as we go, because I want to embrace the sensibilities of the series more so than confine it into what the sensibilities or the temperament in comics are today. Play to its strengths, which is the fact that it's a big, broad, wild adventure, and have fun doing it in the process, more than trying to shrink the story and diminish what might be the value of all the characters and opportunities that are in it.
So I got to ask, is there, Jim, for you, maybe drawing something, or Dan, for you writing, is there a character in Defenders that you have gravitated towards that you like the most, or like you've enjoyed more, creating this time around with your exposure of them?
I'm
Jim,
probably enjoying the Phantom the most. Working on the Phantom, he's the one who's he's very close to the original costume, and he's got an interesting look to him, and different challenges on him. And he's got a nice darkness to the character, which I drift towards darker things.
Yeah. And for me, I'm actually having fun. I'm going to go the opposite way. The only character I drifted away from was Flash. It's kind of weird. I think in my mind, I just sort of concern myself more with his son Rick in his place. But I've sat with a lot of people who like the Phantom, and I mean really like the Phantom, and the characters never really connected with me. But now that I'm writing it, I'm having a blast. The one character I'm having more fun with, even though we shouldn't, is I'm having a great time with Mandrake. I think he's a hoot. I just really think he's just a lot of fun, and he's basically turned. I like the showman aspect of it, and I always want to make sure that he never loses the sense of theatrics about who he is, because given the top hat and the cane and the cape, there's just the theatrical nature of who he is and how he presents himself. And I've turned a weird buddy thing between Phantom and Mandrake, the two of them running together. That has just been a real joy to write, because as Jim said, you're playing with a little bit of the darkness of the Phantom off of the lightness of Mandrake, and they play a nice juxtaposition with each other. And then when I get into Lothar, I'm really focusing on the family aspect. It's a father, probably more of the father-son relationship at the beginning with Lothar and LJ, and then we'll get back into Flash's relationship with Rick. That really is the through line to the entire story, the first half of the story.
Well, I feel like the Phantom is something that, as me growing up as a kid, I still saw it on the Sunday paper, and then I grew up in the 90s as well. So like my superhero comic book movies were the Phantom. So like we didn't have as many movies back when I was a kid. Yeah. So like the Phantom was it. So like I feel like that's probably why you get a little bit more, because it just was out there.
Yeah, can I say one thing? You said something that was interesting, I grew up in New York, and in New York, the Phantom comic strip wasn't in any of the local papers.
Really?
So we never had the Phantom. We never had Flash. A lot of the King Feature Syndicate stuff was not in any of the local New York papers. So we didn't have that exposure to his storytelling. Yeah. And my wife's from San Juan, and she knows the Phantom really well, because they used to show the Phantom. The Phantom used to be in the papers in Puerto Rico, but in New York, he wasn't a character. So I never really had that connection to him, other than the movie that I see, or honestly, it was the first time I was exposed to Phantom was the DC miniseries that they did back in the 80s. And that was my first introduction to the character, and I liked him, but it wasn't this character that I followed anywhere,
So and now I know at the time you kind of strayed away from Flash a little bit. You said, is that kind of because Matt Cave's also having Flash? Is it separate? Are these different worlds or universes, the Flash series and Defenders? Are they kind of somewhat connected?
I think we described as the Flash multiverse. And so we've got our own little world that's really the Defenders of the Earth world, which I think is great, because we have a lot of the aspects of the Flash Gordon universe, and honestly, the story is based on Flash's world. I mean, the villain, the high concept, the threats all are derivative of Flash, and the other characters are brought into it. The hardest part about writing these three characters, or four characters if you count Lothar as well, is they are so unique into their own right. One is a mystical story, one's a science fiction story, one's a grounded, jungle story, and there really is no connective tissue between the three. So Flash's big story had to become the story for everybody. The goal here is now to start to really create paths and stories and action that's really built around the individuals, and show how those characters can move and support each other in different situations, and not just the big picture, which is the world of Flash.
Well, I feel like I could talk to you both about comics forever, but I want to respect your time. Jim, where can people follow along with you and what you're working on, what you're creating, and stay up to date?
I'm on Facebook and Instagram. It's Jim_Calafiore with got to remember the underline after Jim. They can check me up there. I'm posting regularly. I've also have my creator-owned book, Ned, Lord of the Pit, that I put the first volume out a few years ago off of Kickstarter. I'm just getting ready to send the second volume to printer, hopefully end of the month. So that's I've got a lot of creator-owned I've been doing lately, and they can check that out too if they get a chance.
Nice. And what about for you, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing a lot of little work here and there, just more to keep myself busy. Sort of stepped away from Frank Miller Presents, primarily because there was a lot of stuff that Frank wanted to do that I felt was unique to him, and I thought there would be better ways to help implement it, in regards to book styles and all that. And I'm glad to see him working with Abrams to really get the style of type of books he wants to create. And to be perfectly honest, I did a series, my Ancient Enemy series, that I really enjoyed. Then I did a short story for the Godzilla folks, which is a big itch I wanted to scratch. I got a short story in DC's Halloween special, coming back to DC for a Nightwing story they were asking me to do Nightwing, so I'm gonna have a little fun with that. And then the Mad Cave stuff is good. And my big thing is I had a 2-book deal. I had a first book come out last year, which was Hide or Seek, which is a superhero witness protection program book, and I've got a second book that's basically a horror book that's coming out. Hopefully 2025. Fingers crossed if I could get it done. And then after that, it's for me, it's more about what interests me than anything else. It's when you get to a certain point where it really is more about what you get excited about. And I'm lucky to be in that phase of a career right now where I can be able to be very particular about what I enjoy, and that's why I enjoy this. I'm enjoying this series a great deal, more than I thought I would. I'm having a lot of fun. I think getting to learn new characters and build that world out, and getting to work with great people, I think has been it's a nice experience. It reminds me why I like comics.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's what's important.
Yeah, sure. And then where can people follow along with you to stay up with all your projects that you're working on?
I think I have social media sites. I'm pretty sure. Unfortunately, every time I work with a publisher, they tell me to start something up, and I start it up and I completely forget about it. So I think I have. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, Twitter, whatever they want to call it. Although I don't really interact on many of these sites, but I'm there. And people could, if you look for me, you could find me. It should be okay. I'm around.
I'm on Blue Sky also.
Oh yeah.
Blue Sky?
But I'm horrible at social media too. I now do a thing. I do a daily sketch, so I'll make sure I post every day. I do a little sketch in a sketchbook every day, posting. But
Nice.
I'm pretty bad at social media too. I have a website, but my website's been fallow for a year. I mean, I haven't gotten back to it. I'm so bad at this stuff.
Well, it's all good. So Defenders of the Earth first issue comes out in August, I believe, correct?
Correct. I believe also there's a 4-page preview. I'm not sure if it's either in the back I think it's in the back of the Defenders collection, because they're also collecting the original series.
Yep.
I got a chance which was great. I got a chance to do the introduction. I think I did the introduction for that. And did they put the 4-page story in the back of that? Before me.
They did not.
Okay, then it's in the back of Flash #1,
Okay.
probably, and shows you what I know. And but I did the introduction for that. That's fun, and it's a great little start, and hopefully people. I'm interested to see how people go with this. This is like the one of those little fun little books on the sidelines that I think that it's starting to take on a life of its own, and I'm glad to see that. It's been great to be able to work in that fashion too, now that we're out talking about it, it's starting to feel a little bit more real. I feel like we've been working on this for a while. My first conversation about this book was back in San Diego of last year.
Oh,
So
wow.
just to give you an idea how long I've been talking about it. So the fact it's coming real right now is interesting to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you both. A, for taking time to talk to me about comics, and then just for all of what you've done for comics. You both have done a lot of great work in comics, and as a fan, I appreciate that. So thank you both for your time with me. And with that
Thanks
being
for having
said,
me on.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot. Now, thanks for
yep,
the time too.
hopefully you all can then find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.